Have you ever stopped to think about what really happens when someone decides they can finally stop? Stop working, stop pushing, stop worrying, because in theory, they've done their part. That idea feels normal, almost like a fair reward after years of sacrifice, but it isn't, and almost no one questions it. Adult life is built around a silent promise: endure now, and later you get to rest. The problem is that there's an invisible flaw in that logic that rarely gets talked about, and that's exactly where the game begins to change. For years you live in financial survival mode, making decisions non-stop, adjusting expenses, planning the next move, solving problems. Rest becomes the ultimate goal. But what few people realize is that it's not the work itself that keeps everything running. It's necessity. It's the pressure to decide, to choose, to stay relevant inside your own financial life. That might sound exaggerated, but it isn't. When your routine stops demanding decisions, something inside starts to shut down, slowly, almost imperceptibly. Have you lived through this or seen someone else go through it? People who achieved stability, but lost their rhythm, their attention, their involvement. If this sounds familiar, stay with me, because understanding this point completely changes how you see rest, money, and those normal decisions that seem harmless, but aren't. And maybe the most curious part is how almost no one talks about this out loud. Everyone feels it, but very few admit it, because acknowledging that something feels off after rest can sound like ingratitude, like weakness, but it isn't. If this topic resonates with you, if at some point you felt like something lost its rhythm once the pressure eased, leave that here in the comments. Sometimes writing it down helps organize what's still unclear inside, and other people going through the same thing will recognize themselves in it. If this conversation is making you think in a different way, liking the video is a simple way of saying that this kind of reflection matters, of keeping this space alive for others who also sense that something is wrong with the normal decisions of adult life. And if you want to keep exploring this kind of topic, subscribing to the channel isn't a commitment. It's just a way to keep walking together through conversations that almost no one has, but that make all the difference once you start seeing what's behind comfort, money, and choices that seem harmless until they're not. When income stops demanding choices, something quiet begins to happen inside a person's mind. It isn't immediate, it isn't dramatic, and it doesn't draw attention. It even feels like relief. The bills are paid, money keeps coming in, the pressure eases. But almost no one notices this point. Work was never just about earning money. It was always an invisible structure that forced daily decisions, constant adjustments, small strategies to stay in control. That may seem normal, but it isn't trivial. It's that daily friction that keeps the mind active, alert, and engaged. The problem starts when that friction disappears. Without realizing it, people begin to repeat patterns instead of choosing. They keep spending, but stop reviewing. They keep living but stop planning. Money stops being an active tool and becomes just an automatic flow. This is where many confuse stability with clarity. The hidden truth is that for many, stability brings financial apathy. Not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack stimulus. They lose the need to decide. This affects more than just the wallet. It affects mentality. People start avoiding anything that requires cognitive effort, learning something new, adjusting strategies, questioning habits. Small decisions get postponed, then ignored. It feels like rest, but it's actually disengagement, and the impact shows up behind the scenes of financial life. Opportunities that go unnoticed, costs that grow silently, and a strange sense of stagnation even with money available. It's an invisible journey, but deeply transformative, and almost always in the wrong direction. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because understanding this automatic mode completely changes how you see safety, comfort, and the everyday decisions that seem harmless. If all of this is resonating with you, comment at the end. This makes sense to me. There's a specific point where everything starts to go wrong, and it often goes unnoticed because it's disguised as success. It's the moment comfort begins to be mistaken for progress. A person looks at their financial life, sees stability, no urgency, less tension, and assumes they're moving forward. But almost no one realizes that comfort doesn't push anything ahead. It only keeps everything still. That's the hidden truth behind many stories of stagnation. The money is there, but the involvement isn't. From that moment on, decisions start to be avoided. Not because of a lack of ability, but because deciding takes effort. Adjusting strategy requires energy. Learning something new creates discomfort. Reviewing financial habits forces you to face old mistakes. So without noticing, the person chooses the easier path, keeping everything as it is. This is where the final financial error settles in, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a series of small abdications, a course that never gets taken, a cost that never gets reviewed, an opportunity ignored because it's not worth the effort right now. Money doesn't disappear all at once, it leaks. It leaks through decisions that aren't made, calculated risks that never happen, adjustments postponed indefinitely. And the most dangerous part is that it doesn't hurt at first. On the contrary, it feels like peace, it feels deserved. But behind the scenes, something is changing in the mindset. The relationship with money stops being active and becomes passive. The person stops steering their own financial journey and starts merely occupying it. Now I want to go even deeper into this because understanding this silent trade-off between involvement and comfort completely changes how you see stability and security. If at some point you noticed this happening or felt that something became too comfortable, comment, "I'm on this journey too." That's where a phenomenon begins that almost no one associates with money, but that has a deep impact on financial life. Some people age financially, long before their time. Not in a biological sense, but in the way they think, react, and make decisions. Mental agility declines, fear of change grows, and anything outside the familiar starts to feel too risky. People begin to rely almost entirely on fixed income, predictable routines, scenarios where nothing needs to be questioned. And little by little, that uncomfortable feeling appears, the sense of being out of the game. The most dangerous part is that this doesn't happen only to those who retire early. It also happens to those who in the middle of adult life decide to settle, those who stop challenging themselves because this is good enough. The error has no age. It has a pattern of avoiding discomfort, rejecting learning, treating any transformation as a threat. Behind the scenes, this mindset creates a silent rigidity. The person may have money but loses flexibility, may have time but loses initiative, may have security but loses vision. And when the world changes, because it always does, this profile suffers more. New opportunities feel too complicated. New decisions feel exhausting. The financial journey stops being something alive and becomes something defensive. This isn't about stopping work. It's about stopping self-challenge. That's the point where many people realize too late that it wasn't rest that cost them dearly, but the unconscious choice to disengage from their own evolution. Now I want to go even deeper into this, because recognizing this pattern in yourself can be uncomfortable, but it's also the beginning of real change. If any part of this hit close to home, comment, "This makes sense to me." Maybe everything comes down to a simple but deeply uncomfortable question. If tomorrow you no longer had to work, what would still require decisions from you? Not what would fill your time, but what would continue to demand attention, adjustments, real choices, because that's exactly where the line is drawn between those who simply slow down and those who slowly disappear from their own game. Almost no one asks this question while chasing stability, and when they finally do, it's often too late to recognize the impact. The people who age well, financially and mentally, aren't the ones who never stop. They're the ones who never stop choosing. They do slow down, yes, but they maintain some form of involvement that demands presence. They keep adjusting direction, reviewing decisions, questioning habits. Not because they have to, but because they understand something few people see. True security doesn't come from the absence of effort. It comes from the continuous ability to decide. There's a hidden truth here that changes the entire perspective. Rest isn't the same as shutting down. Comfort doesn't have to mean giving up control. There's a huge difference between reducing the pace and leaving the game. And that difference shows up behind the scenes of financial life in the mindset that stays active even when urgency fades. It's a quiet journey, made of small revelations, where transformation happens precisely when someone realizes that the biggest risk isn't working too much. It's stopping the challenge. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because there are ways to build comfort without losing involvement, and freedom without giving up personal evolution. If that question is still echoing inside you, comment, "This makes sense to me." If you made it this far, it's because this conversation touched something real in your journey. Not everyone stops to question comfort, decisions, and that quiet silence that sometimes settles in when the pressure fades. So, if it feels right to you, subscribing to the channel is simply a way to keep walking this path of clarity, to keep going deeper into reflections that almost no one has the time or the courage to face. If this message was meant for you, write that in the comments. Or something like, "I'm with you till the end. I read everything." And that's where this conversation stops being just mine and becomes ours. And if this video helped you see something in a new way, leaving a like is a quiet way of keeping this kind of content alive here on the platform. There's a video right here next to this one that complements this topic perfectly, exploring another angle of the same idea. Click and continue with me there, because this journey still has a lot more that needs to be revealed.